here on the Big Band Files with Doug Miles and Don Henderson today. WSLR LPFM 96.5 in Sarasota, WSLR.org, streamed online. And Don, we have a special guest.
Well, we've got a few special guests. You've got Jan Everly coming in, and of course everybody knows Ray Everly and Bob Everly, and they're going to come in after 12 o'clock and chat a little bit with you about some of the old-time music. But right now we've got baseball aficionado who happened to become a vocalist at the same time, Timmy McCarver. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Don. I really apologize for being late today, but I blame everything on my knee replacement. I had my knee replaced on December 8th, and anytime I forget things over the last 2 months, I tell everybody, and there is some truth to it, that the knee has superseded everything.
Well, I'll tell you.
In some respects, it has.
I'll tell you, Comcast, when they heard there used to be a ballpark right here, they decided to shut us down for about 3 minutes. Now, I don't know if that's indicative of your voice or what.
I didn't expect to hear you be singing, Tim.
Well, you know, I figured I was not getting any younger, and I thought a couple of years ago, since I had Jerry Wexler, the famous producer, as my next-door neighbor, I consulted with him, and he said, you know, your voice is okay if you want to do a DVD or a CD. I'd go ahead and do it because we're not getting any younger. So he was kind of my advisor on that. Jerry died a year and a half ago,
right.
And really without his help, I don't think I'd have gone through with it. He got the producer in Memphis. I went to Memphis. I did it at Sun Records, Sam Phillips' famous studio. And then about a year later, we did the CD at Ardent Studios, and I'm glad I did it.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing, Tim, because we talk about getting into things you never thought of as a youngster, and of course, you know, your whole life was dedicated to baseball for such a long period of time, but then you got into the radio broadcasting career, then you got into the record producing career. So things sort of take a turn at their own. You don't really think you're going to do these things, but they just happen to fall in line.
Well, that's really well said, Don. And you know, I've always been influenced by music. Growing up in Memphis, of course, the blues. Elvis came in 1954. And I remember as a 13-year-old, I carried papers in the morning, and I came back and listened to Elvis Presley's first song on the air when Dewey Phillips, the disc jockey, played it. And it was Blue Moon of Kentucky, and the flip side was That's All Right Mama, and of course That's All Right Mama became the huge hit. But I was influenced throughout the 50s and the 60s by not only the big band music, but the blues, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, that group. And Memphis was really the hub of the blues.
Absolutely, and of course people that they just had the great anniversary for Elvis Presley, and had 75th anniversry, his 75th birthday. He's the same age I am. He's about 3 years younger than you, but they just had that. And of course, we used to go down to Memphis, Beale Street, right behind the Peabody there, and I used to love to see the Ducks come marching out there. That's sort of a tradition down there.
Ducks in the lobby and the rendezvous for ribs down the alley.
Boy, I'll tell you, that's a great little place, and
terrific.
We had a lot of fun in Memphis, but. Really, so Wexler really got you started on the idea of putting something like this together.
He did, and he encouraged me. He said, "Now don't give up on it." And a fellow by the name of Sid Selvage, who's a performer in his own right, he was the producer, and I had a partner who split the cost of it. And really, I didn't think this thing would ever be commercial. I didn't think it would sell. And we had 3,000 copies in our closets. Both John Stokes, my partner, in Memphis, and me here in Sarasota, and I didn't think it would sell. Well, this year our producer in baseball got a hold of it, and he said, you know, you ought to do something with that, and we can kind of help. So anyway, they started playing snippets of it during the broadcast, and one memorable Saturday, we had a perfect. And Joe Buck, of course, my partner for 14 years, was just been great about everything. And we had a perfect moment where we were talking about Willie Mays. It was a Yankees-Phillies game. And we were talking about Willie Mays and how he had played about a mile from the new Yankee Stadium. And we had a shot at Coogan's Bluff. And right at that minute, the umpires had a disagreement with the ground crew. They had to come out and repair a bag at second base. Somebody had uprooted the bag at second base, I think Johnny Damon. Well, anyway, it was a perfect lead-in for Joe to talk about there used to be a ballpark, and we had some great shots of the old stadium, of Yankee Stadium, and it was a natural. And they played about half the song, and then I told the story about the composer Joe Raposo, who wrote that song. He also wrote "Here's to the Winners, Here's to the Losers," "It's Not That Easy Being Green," the theme to Sesame Street, and I had the good fortune of meeting Joe Raposo at Shea Stadium about 20 years ago.
Well, I'll tell you, and for those folks that are old enough to remember Ebbets Field and the Polo Grounds and the great games that were played, that's even a little before. you got to the Polo Grounds, but I don't think you ever got to Ebbets Field.
I did not make it to Ebbets Field, and that, of course, is what that song is all about.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And Joe Raposo wrote that song in a day. He told me the story. He said he had crocodile tears running down his face. He played the song for Sinatra about 7 or 8 months later. And I guess what would happen with Frank is that you'd go to his rather palatial estate and play the song in his music room, and he would judge it as to whether he wanted to sing it or not. And Raposo played this song for Sinatra. And as Joe told me the story, he turned around after the song was over and he said, "Kid, you hit a home run." And I thought that was a great story, so I told it that Joe Raposo ultimately died about 3 or 4 years after we met from pancreatic cancer.
Well, I'll tell you, when you follow the music industry and you see some of the things that happen, and of course, when they can, bring to light Ebbets Field and the Polo Grounds and Willie Mays and Joe DiMaggio and this kind of thing, it just, for those folks that are old enough to remember, it's just tremendous thought to think ahead to that.
It's funny you should mention Willie Mays. I just received his biography, the authorized biography by James Hirsch, and Roger Maris's biography. In a week, I get Maris's biography and Willie Mays' biography.
Well, I'll tell you, when you read Roger Maris's and you see how he got the beer distributorship in Georgia, you'll have a lot of fun when he got the Budweiser distributorship down there and how it was.
Tell me about it. We were teammates those 2 years.
Yeah, because
1967 and 8.
The fellow that had that beer distributorship for Budweiser did not want to give it up, and Augie Bush said, "Look, John Pepin." Yeah, that's exactly right. John Pepin is now down here in St. Pete, and he wound up with the biggest beer distributorship down here, but he didn't want to leave Georgia. He wanted to stay there.
He didn't want to leave the 8 counties around Gainesville.
Absolutely right. It's one of the fantastic stories of Budweiser and how they got down here and how Pepin got over here. And he was a great friend of a friend of mine, Tommy Ryan, who owned the beer distributorship, which just merged with Crown in New Jersey. But it's amazing how these things sort of go full circle. And
when you think about that, Don, that might have been the greatest one-year contract ever signed in the history of sports.
You're exactly right.
Roger got $80,000 for playing in 1968, plus a Budweiser distributorship.
And what are they worth? Well, the funny thing was that for years, Tommy lived over on Treasure Island, as did Mr. Bush, and so we would go over there each year he would have the at the end of spring training, he always had that big party at his house, and boy, what a lot. And the funny thing was, the players all tended bar and not the current players, retired players. All worked for him, and they did things at his house, and he was really quite a character. He was one of the great characters in the game, and a very close friend of Harry Carey, and in fact, he and Harry were gin rummy partners, and I remember him playing, and Harry saying, "What do you make a martini with?" And everybody would yell out, "Gin." Well, as I remember, you were much more of a bridge player than a gin rummy player.
I was. You got a great memory, Don.
I'll tell you, it was a lot of fun because you guys used to play bridge almost all the time. And,
we had, on a 25-man roster in the late 70s, we had 2 tables of bridge, which is unheard of. That's 8 guys.
Yeah.
And so to have that many bridge players on one team is unprecedented.